on during. If there are big questions, I'll interrupt, or we'll save them for the end. But thanks everyone so much for joining, and I'm going to give it over to Aly.
Thank you, Carly. I appreciate that. So like Carly said, this is really going to be talking about some interviewing tips, some resume tips, and most importantly, how to share your story when you're in an interview, whether it's to a recruiter, like somebody like me, or to the hiring manager and HR, what to share, what not to share, and really how to tell your story in a cohesive way that makes you sound, and well, if you are, especially, the right candidate. So let's just move forward. So who am I and why am I here? So I am a recruiter at JK Executive Strategies. I've been doing this for a little over a year now. Prior to that, I was in more of the HR space. And my job is to really work with companies to help them find great talent and work with talent to help them find great companies. I'm kind of that middleman. I'm an advocate on both sides. I help everything with finding the right candidate, to submitting the right candidate to the clients, working through the interview process, any resume writing tips that they may need, helping, to prep before the interviews, to talk after the interviews, and then the most important part is the negotiations if the offer does come in. Again, really that advocate for both sides. So I'm really here today to just give you guys some of my insights and tips, and hopefully you guys will take something great out of this. And if you have any questions, like Carly said, please enter them in the chat and I'll answer them when Carly gives them. So a couple of the key points that we're going to cover: rules of resume writing, what to do and what not to do, how to tell my story, your social profile, which I think is especially important right now with the current climate, some interviewing tips, and then most importantly, what to do after the interview. So just quickly, some rules of resume writing. Please make sure that you always include your name, your address, and if you don't need to give your full address, more specifically, your city and zip. Because when you apply to a job, most likely your resume is going to go into an applicant tracking system. And the way that we feed out individuals that don't live in our area is by that zip and city. So that's really important. Your phone number, your email address, and if you have a LinkedIn profile, definitely include that too. Your LinkedIn profile, which I think I'll get to in a little bit, really should be your online resume. So everything that you have on your resume, the dates should match. If there's any gaps, the gaps should be consistent. The title should be consistent. The company should be consistent. Don't include pictures or graphics. That's not necessary anymore. It actually messes up the algorithm with an applicant tracking system, so it makes it more difficult. Use a really clean and professional font. Avoid spelling errors. You would be surprised how many spelling errors we actually see on resumes all the time. Don't use I, and I actually have a spelling error, so not life, it's lie. Don't lie on your resume. That's really important. Sorry about that. And keep it to one page. So if you have more than 10 years of work experience, it really should be a one-page resume. Anything over 10 years can expand to 2 or 3 pages. It's no longer just needs to be a one page, but try to keep it concise and to the point. You don't have to necessarily go back 20, 25 years, 30 years of experience, especially if it's not within the given fields that you're applying. And try to avoid those paragraphs. Really use some short sentences. They don't have to be complete sentences, but just short and to the point. Punctuation is also really important. So I know it's a little small, but this is an example of a really great resume. It gives, again, you have your address up top, specifically where the city you reside in, and your zip code. You have your phone number. You have your name up top. You have an objective or a personal summary that should really talk about who you are and what you're looking for in your next opportunity. Education should be highlighted as well if you have education, or if you have certificates, those should be highlighted. Licensures, those should be highlighted as well. Relevant experience, again, breaking out the company, what type of position it was, where it was located, and then the dates. Those are also very important. We always recommend using month and year. That way you can see any gaps in time. We think that that's really important. Leadership experience, if this is a job that is specific to leadership, or if it's specific to If you, I guess, have a certification that you had to have publications for, maybe that's something that you want to highlight. Really, you want to put on your resume what you think hiring managers are going to want to see and know about you. Here's an example of a really bad resume if anyone watches The Office. So you have a lot of pictures happening, a lot of graphics. You have obviously his picture, a crazy background, a ton of different fonts. The fonts are just really unnecessary. Keep it to a clean, really, one font is important. You don't have to use the Times Roman numerals anymore, but whatever you think is easiest to read. So your reference list. A lot of companies are going to ask for references once you get to, probably the second round interview. They're going to want to hear from, your prior employers, prior coworkers, how you work in an office environment. How do you do working with other coworkers? How are you at your job? So you want to keep your reference list as professional as possible. So you want to have your heading that is consistent with your resume. You want to provide the name, the title, where they currently work, and their cell phone number. It's also really important to provide information about who they are to you. Are they a prior coworker? Are they a prior boss? Are they a friend? You want to make sure that you have that so that the person that are checking the references have they already know about this individual, so it's not an awkward, so who are you again? What's your relationship? You want to provide at least 3 professional references as well. And again, they can be coworkers, prior bosses, people that you worked on projects with, and ask permission and contact your references before you actually submit them. So they know that somebody is going to be reaching out. If you know who is reaching out, like usually it'll be me, make sure you tell them that Aly from JK Exec will be reaching out on behalf of the company that you're applying for. Give them any information that you can about the job. So you don't have to go into detail about where it is, but say it's an HR job or it's an accounting job. Just so they have a little bit of background and they can actually start to really think about what they want to say about you and what's relevant too. A couple of other just really important items that we like to make sure we tell that will really make a big impression. Your email that you use for applying to jobs should be consistent every time. So don't change your email up. Use the same email. Create just a plain email from Gmail with your first name, last name. If you have to put a number, that way all of your job search will go right to that email. It makes it a lot easier. You're not digging through your personal email. Make sure that you always have an email signature too. So that should be your name and your phone number. You can also add your email address if you want. I can't tell you how many times people are like, yeah, give me a call and an email, but I don't have their phone number and I don't have a way to give them a call quickly, especially if I have a job available. And your greeting should be professional also. Hello, hi, good afternoon, good morning. That's also really important. Don't save your resume as resume.doc either. Save it using probably your first and last name, because that again will just make it a lot easier for hiring managers, HR, recruiters to be able to quickly pull your resume out. It'll go into the applicant tracking system the correct way. Make sure that it is able to be downloaded also. We get a lot of resumes that we can't actually download for whatever reason. The other thing I want to say is about your voicemail greeting. Your voicemail greeting, make sure it says your first and last name, or at least your first name, or it repeats the phone number. It's hard sometimes when they say, yep, leave a message, and I don't know if I'm actually calling the right number, so I could be leaving a message for somebody completely different than who I mean to call. And make sure that your voicemail storage isn't full. That's really important if you are looking for a job right now, because we won't be able to leave you messages and then you won't know who's calling you and you probably won't call them back. So another thing I wanted to talk about was really creating your story, creating a story about who you are and how to really convey that to the hiring managers. I know certain situations you don't need to legally disclose a lot of information, but you also might not feel comfortable doing that to a complete stranger. So figuring out a way to craft your story in a way that makes you sound, it allows you to control the narrative, which I think is really important. So if you're in control of what you share and how you share it, you're going to feel more comfortable actually sharing some information. And how to do that? Well, so how I tell candidates to do that is obviously practice, but when you have a gap in your resume, it's okay to say that the gap in your resume was for personal issues or personal problems or family issues. Hiring managers, usually they shouldn't ask, well, tell me what that means. If they do, then you probably, one, don't want to work for that company if they're prying like that and they're not respecting boundaries. But two, you can just say, I don't feel comfortable disclosing it at this time. Or you can say, it was nothing other than just some personal issues that I was going through and I felt like I wasn't in the right headspace to be working at that time. Using words other than fired, also laid off, the job was eliminated. Those are some keywords that you want to try to use versus I was fired, because that, in a hiring manager's mind, that might be a negative when maybe it was really just that your job was eliminated because there were layoffs or there were budget cuts, or it was a duplicate job. And I can't, you always hear hiring managers and HR say that they don't want job hoppers. Well, that's really not a thing anymore because there's a lot of layoffs currently with COVID, and people have their own story. So as long as you're able to tell your story and say, yep, I left this job because, it wasn't a great culture fit, or I left this job because I was just dealing with some personal issues and I wasn't able to work for that time. Or I think it's really important to be able to know your story and stick to your story so that you're not constantly changing it. You're able to practice it. You're not intimidated. Use family, friends, trusted advisors to tell your story. I think is going to be really important. And be confident. So again, practice your story. You'll be more confident. You'll be able to clearly state who you are, what your experience is, and why you're the best fit for the job. At the end of the day, that's what they're looking for when they want to hear about who you are. They want to know that you're the person that can do the job. So when they ask you, talk to me about your job changes, or let's go through your resume, you don't need to say anything other than I left this opportunity, or I left this job because I was going through something personal, or I left this job to take on a better opportunity or a promotional opportunity, or my position was eliminated because of budget cuts. You don't really have to go in too deep about why you left. They more want to know, what did you do at that job? So a little bit more about crafting your story. So you want to these are the 4 big things that I think is important. So the origin. How did you become interested in the field? So if they ask, tell me a little bit about yourself, this is the story that you should create for yourself. Write it down, practice it, tell it to everybody that you feel comfortable telling it to. So why are you interested in this field? Is it accounting? Is it finance? Is it HR? Why is this important to you? Why does this specific job interest you? So make sure you look at the job description. Why does this interest you? Is it because of the company? Have you heard good things about the culture? Do you know somebody that works there? Or is this job similar to a prior position that you held? Do you have any schooling that pushed you in this direction? So these are the first 3 things that you want to think about when crafting your story. Then the rundown. Cover your goals, your accomplishments, and then again, the transitions for each position. The transitions are really, that word transition I feel like is really important. It's not job changes, it's not, jumping, it's a transition. Every position that you took is most likely giving you more experience, different experience to be able to get you to where you are today. And you can say that too. Don't just read your resume and call it a day. They probably have your resume in front of you. So tell them things that are on your resume that you feel are important. Again, you set the narrative. You're in control of the narrative. You tell what you want to share. And be honest. That's really important. Again, that honesty about, I was going through something personal. I had some family issues. You can say that. People tell me that all the time, and we just leave it at that. That's your personal business, and it's okay. So what should come across? Understanding on how you perceive your career path. That is so important. So, laying the foundations for important questions that the hiring manager or HR might want to ask. But really, you want to show that you're confident in your career path, you're confident in being able to tell your story, so that you're confident in being able to do the job. And then really they're asking this because they want to assess your communication skills. So if you know what you're talking about, you're confident, you're clear, you're concise, they don't have to ask a ton of questions about why you might have left somewhere or what you did there, because you really went through your story, then you should be able to ace that part. Finally, with crafting your stories, you want to connect the dots back to the job description, back to the company. So what caught your attention about the job? What made you apply? Why this specific company? And I'm going to go into a little bit more about, that with interviewing in a little bit. But also really importantly is, how does their mission align with your values? If you're applying for a not-for-profit, is it a not-for-profit that you feel passionate about? If you're applying for a job within finance, is it with a company that you can feel good going to every day? You believe in what they do. They support the community just like you do. Or maybe you know somebody there. So definitely dig into their missions, their values, their vision for the company, what they're looking to do in the community, to make sure that they really align with what you want. So that's a little bit about my story. And if anyone has any questions, let me know. But I want to jump into a little bit more about social media. I know social media is a tool that we all use nowadays. But just that 70% of employers also use social media to screen applicants. Nowadays, there's no difference between who you are in person and who you are on your social media profile. So pay attention to those misspellings. Pay attention, other than just LinkedIn. Your personal brand is who you are, whether you like it or not. So make sure that what you're sharing on your social media is something that you would want potential employers to see. I do a lot of these talks with kids from, interns or kids in college, and I always tell them, whatever you post on your page, make sure you want your grandparents to be able to see it and feel okay with it, because that's basically what an employer is. When you're on LinkedIn, ask for recommendations from prior bosses, from prior coworkers, prior clients. Recommendations look great, and they're definitely something that we look for when we're looking at possible candidates. So personal brand blunders. You have LinkedIn, you have Instagram, you have Facebook nowadays. We all use them, and we all look people up. We all do, we all dig deep to figure out more about individuals. So if you don't have social media, that's also okay. That's not going to look negative on you at all. I would recommend that everybody does have a LinkedIn page, because it is a very professional page. That's where you can network, and you can, especially if you're looking for a job. A lot of jobs are posted on LinkedIn pages, so that's okay. But if you don't have social media, that's also totally fine. So if you don't want what you have posted to be your first impression for a potential employer or coworker, delete it. So I got a couple of stats here. 34% of hiring managers who currently research candidates via social media said they have found information that has caused them not to hire a candidate. The content ranges from evidence of inappropriate behavior to information that contradicted their listed qualifications. So maybe they posted some provocative or inappropriate photos. There was information about drinking or using drugs, especially if you're under 21. Poor communication skills. 35% of hiring managers says that they didn't hire somebody because of poor communication skills on their social media. So that's really important. Candidates badmouthed previous employers on their social media pages. That's also really important. Rochester is a very small community. You never know who knows who. So if you're interviewing at a job and you might, maybe you badmouthed you badmouthed your previous employer in that job interview, which I recommend never doing. Those people might know each other, and then that could be, a red flag for that individual. Candidates made discriminatory comments related to race, gender, or religion, etc. 28%. That's really big, especially nowadays. Or candidates lied about your qualifications. So that's what I said about, making sure your LinkedIn profile is your resume. We will go on, if we have your resume, we'll look you up on LinkedIn to make sure that they match. And if they don't, we're probably going to ask you why. On the flip side, 30% of hiring managers who currently research candidates have found something that caused them to hire a candidate. So your social media pages and your personal brand can actually be a positive as well. So 58% said that they had a good feeling for the candidate's personality. They conveyed a professional image. Their background information supported their professional qualifications. They were well-rounded and showed a wide range of interests, great communication skills. Candidate was created. Or other people posted great references about the candidate on LinkedIn. So again, those references and recommendations are really important. So now, specifically going into interviewing, if we were all in a room right now, I'd ask you guys to show hands about who's nervous about interviewing. I know interviewing can be a really terrifying experience, especially if you're not used to doing it. And now that we are mostly on Zoom, it's definitely caused a little bit more angst. So a couple of tips is that the more you are prepared, the less nervous you'll be. And this goes back to telling my story. So making sure that you're prepared with your story when you're in an interview, you're going to be less nervous by actually going to the interview and sharing that story. Knowing your reasons for job changes, knowing your reasons for those gaps, which gaps are totally fine. So just make sure you have not a reason, but you're able to identify why you had that gap. Again, personal reasons, family reasons. You took some time off to be close to family, or maybe you had to move a couple of times. Why did you move? Being able to say, I moved to be closer to family to have a support system, whether it was because of family or personal reasons. I moved back to Rochester because this is where my family is. Those are totally fine. So a couple of just tips of how to be prepared and how to make sure that you're not so nervous is to find your interviewer on LinkedIn. So do a Google search on them. They're going to do it on you. Why not do it on them? Learn about them. What do they like? Is there something that you can bring to the interview? Maybe you guys both support the same charity, or maybe you guys went to the same college or same high school. Google also the company and visit their website. Learn about them. This is so important. Learn about, have they had any recent hires, any recent mergers? If they are a manufacturing company, what do they manufacture? What product do they sell, represent? Do they represent a service? What's that service look like? Do they have a client base? Are you able to see any of that? Excuse me. That's really important because they're going to ask you, why us? Why this company? Why this job? And if you just say, oh, it looks like you got a great culture, or I've heard great things about you, that's really going to show that you didn't do a whole lot of research. And somebody that did do research is probably going to end up being the #1 candidate. So make sure if you're able to say, oh, I did a little bit of research on your company and the website, and I saw that you guys support similar charities to me, and I love the outreach to the community, or, I see you guys manufacture a similar product that I've worked with before. Whatever that may be, it's gonna set you apart. The next thing that I want to recommend is reviewing the job description. This is really important. So make sure you know everything that you can bring to the table based on the job description. I actually recommend, and we recommend this everybody from an entry-level job all the way up to a C-suite job and executives. Take the job description, export it into Word if you have Word, or print it out, and actually jot down some project examples or some examples of things you've done in the past underneath different responsibilities or different qualification requirements. This way, when you're having the initial phone screen, which we'll talk about in a minute, you're quickly able to, you don't have to think about it at the top of your mind anymore, and it's right there on the piece of paper. Zoom interviews too are really helpful because they don't see what you're doing. They don't see what you're looking at. You can have all of your papers in front of you. Also, if you have your resume and you want to jot down your story on your resume so that you can easily make sure that you tell your story in a cohesive way, you're telling it the same every time, do that. Jot down reasons as to why you left a certain job. Make sure that you feel comfortable being able to tell your story and being able to tell it to whoever's listening. Also, you can totally bring these items with you to an in-person interview as well. That's totally fine. So if you have, they actually might like to see that. Bring a binder that has your a couple of pieces of your resume with your notes on it, qualifications with your notes on it. It's going to show that you're prepared. It's going to show that you've done research and that you're taking this very seriously. So these are just a couple of steps that we've seen the interview process most recently, specifically also with COVID. So typically, the first step of an interview process is going to be a phone screen. It's going to be either with HR, with the hiring manager themselves, or maybe with a recruiter. And it's really going to make sure that the phone screen is to make sure that you have the qualifications, you have the technical skills to do the job. Then the first interview, which it would have been a face-to-face, but now it might be a Zoom interview, is typically going to be with the hiring manager, and it's typically going to make sure that you're going to be a fit culturally. Do you guys mesh well together? Do you have good rapport? Do you guys have this company and you have similar values? Will you fit into their culture? That's really important. Now, the second interview will either be a more in-depth interview if you guys weren't able to get everything answered in the first interview, or maybe it's going to be a team interview now. We've been seeing that a lot more with Zoom, a couple of meet and greets, less of an interview style and more of just having you get to know the team, being able to ask them questions. Typically what's really nice is that the hiring manager won't normally be on that interview, so that you're really able to ask about the leadership and dig in a little bit more about that. Before the second interview could be a meal, a coffee, or a drink. If you don't drink and they take you to a bar, order water, order, soda. That's totally fine. They're not going to, judge you for anything. We actually had an individual who was from Ireland interview for a job, and he ordered a glass of milk at a bar. That's what they did there, and we thought that was so cool. So that's totally okay. But if you do have a drink, be mindful of how much you're drinking. Probably only order one. Don't order multiple. If you do have a meal, another funny story is somebody actually ordered a steak at a dinner, and he picked up the steak and ate it with his hands, like a hamburger, like a sandwich. So find your manners, use your silverware, use napkins. Also, don't be the reason that people stay. Know your audience. Maybe time yourself and give yourself 45 minutes. And if after the 45 minutes, it seems like people are looking at their watch or checking their phones, maybe it's time to wrap up and leave. So just be really, just be cognizant of that. Also, what should you order? We get these questions a lot when you're going to a meal. Order something that's easy to eat, nothing that's too messy, but something that you can easily eat while somebody's answering a question that you might have, or in between bites. Whether that's a salad or maybe pasta, something that's not going to be super messy. Also, I always wait until everyone else orders their meal so I can see what they're ordering if you're uncomfortable with what you should order. And also pay attention to how you treat everybody in the interview process, specifically if you're going on site. So make sure that you're treating the receptionist the same way as you're treating the CEO, because most likely the CEO is going to walk outside after you leave and ask the receptionist what they thought. What did you do in the waiting room? Were you on your phone? Were you looking at magazines? Were you reviewing your paperwork? So make sure that you're really mindful of that. We actually had somebody yell at the receptionist because they didn't get water quick enough for them, and they did not get the job because that went right back to the hiring manager. And that shows who they are and what type of person they are, and they're probably not the right culture fit. So another question we get a lot is, what should I wear? 55% of another person's perception of you is based on how you look, whether that's right or not. And so making sure that you are as professional as possible is really important, but specifically for the environment that you're walking into is really important also. So you never have a chance to make a first impression again. So make sure that your first impression is the way that you want to be perceived. So for ladies, We say solid colors. Conservative is really important. You know, coordinate your blouse to make sure it matches if you're wearing a jacket or if you're wearing jewelry. But also try to limit your jewelry. Don't wear really big, chunky jewelry, especially if it's on a Zoom interview, because as you move, if you're wearing bracelets, I obviously talk with my hands, it's going to be clinking and clanging, and it's probably going to, you know, distract the person you're talking to. Moderate shoes. That's also really important. Making sure that your hair is neat and professional. If you're wearing, you know, hosiery, making sure it's tan or it's, you know, the correct color. Be very careful with how much perfume you wear, and this is for both ladies and gentlemen. Cologne and perfume, you're going to choke somebody if you wear too much. So make sure you wear an appropriate amount. Bring a portfolio, bring a bag, bring a folder with your resumes, piece of paper. Go to Staples and buy the dollar folders. That's just going to show that you're prepared and you're super professional. So again, khakis, corduroy, twill, cotton pants, skirts, neatly pressed, sweaters, twin sets, cardigans, polos, knit shirts. Solid colors probably are better than bright patterns. Some things not to wear: short skirts, really clunky high shoes, long crazy nails, or you know, crazy stocking colors, heavy makeup, and also really low-rise pants. Those are some things probably stay away from. So for men, similar advice: solid colors, conservative, white long sleeve shirt, conservative tie, dark socks, professional shoes, also very limited jewelry. Make sure that your hair is neat and professional. If it's long, pull back. Go easy on the aftershave and that cologne. Again, you don't want to, you know, leave the room and they can still smell you for days after. Have your portfolio, have your folder. What not to wear: try to avoid worn belts, unmatching belt and shoes, which I know is kind of the style nowadays, so that's a little out. Heavy jewelry, unpressed shirts, bad tie. You know, what color should you wear? Keep it pretty low key. Don't wear crazy colors. Athletic socks with street shoes, maybe not the best idea either, but at the end of the day, it's, you know, whatever you have that you can look the most professional is probably what you should do. I actually had a candidate come to my office who his shirt looked literally like it was crumpled up and thrown in a drawer, and he just uncrumpled it and put it on. I mean, it was so dirty, it was so wrinkled, and it just didn't give him a great first impression. So some of the rules about interviewing: dress up rather than down, but also if you're working with a recruiter or you're working with HR or you know somebody that, you know, works at the company, ask them what the culture is like and what you should and shouldn't wear, because you don't want to walk into a room where everyone's wearing jeans and a sweatshirt and you show up in, you know, a three-piece suit. That's going to make you uncomfortable, and then you're going to be thinking about that the entire interview. So if you're working with a recruiter, ask them what the culture is like. I had a candidate go into an interview with a software company and they wore, you know, jeans and a sweatshirt. I told them to wear khakis and a button down, or khakis and a sweater. Don't need to wear the three-piece suit or the jacket. We've also had we've had to tell candidates to avoid dressing maybe too slick when going into an interview, specifically at maybe like an auto body shop or a car dealership or a place like Monroe Muffler or manufacturing company, because you also don't want to turn people off. Like, well, maybe you're overqualified for the job, or you don't dress like we do, or whatever they might be feeling. So for the interview itself, turn your phone off. This is very important. For the 1 hour interview that you have, your calls, your text messages, you know, your social media can wait. We've had candidates answer calls multiple times, and obviously emergencies happen. We all get that, but just try to be cautious of it. If you have like an Apple Watch, make sure you keep that quiet too, so you're not tempted to keep looking at it. Bring copies of your resume. That's also very important. You never know who's going to show up to the interview. You want to make sure you're prepared, so have multiple copies. And also bring something to write with and bring your notes. Bring a piece of paper, bring a pen. Take notes while you're doing it. If you're in a Zoom interview, make it look like, you know, make it obvious that you're taking the notes, so they see that you're interacting and you're engaged. One of the recommendations that we have for interviews that are panels, if you're sitting there and you're talking to maybe 5 people, when you have your piece of paper, write down their names in order of where they're sitting, because then if you want to ask a question, you can say, Carly, I wanted to ask you this, or Aly, I wanted to ask you that. That way you're directing your question directly to them. You're remembering their name without actually having to remember it. I know I'm terrible at remembering names. So, and then it also shows that you care. Just one more thing to show that you care. So a couple of things on Zoom interviews. Make sure that you're prepared also. Make sure you practice ahead of time. Make sure, if you're not used to the format that you're using, see if you can practice with a friend or a family member, or just try to log in, do some research. YouTube's your best friend. That way you are prepared and there's no glitches. But also at the same time, it's a Zoom interview and not everyone's internet is reliable, and people get that. So if there are glitches, if you are frozen, just make sure you say, I'm so sorry you broke up there for a minute. Can you repeat your question? Or if you think that you froze, it's okay to say, did I freeze there for a minute? Did I answer your question? Or where did you hear me leave off last? And then just pick up right from there. Also be in a space with minimal distraction and pretty great lighting. So practice ahead of time. Make sure that there's nothing too crazy on the walls. We interviewed with a client, and she was working in her attic, and she had boxes, up to here, and papers, and it was just very distracting, and I couldn't focus on her because I just wanted to clean up her mess so badly. Also, what you wear on your Zoom interview is just as important as what you wear when you're in person. So party on the bottom, professional on top. Wear a mullet. So make sure that you're wearing your clean shirt, but then wear your pajama pants on the bottom. That's totally fine. Again, no clunky loud jewelry for Zoom interviews, because that's also going to be distracting, and the microphone's probably going to pick up on that. Also, when you're on a Zoom interview, be very cautious about the patterns that you wear, even more so than when you're in an in-person interview, because it can cause a distraction on the screen, and then somebody's face is going to go, or their eyes are going to go right to the pattern versus, listening to what you're saying. And if you do have a panel on a Zoom interview, typically their name should be at the bottom of their screen, but also write down in order where they are if that helps. And make sure that you seriously do address them this time. You do say their name with whatever question you have, or that was a great question, so-and-so. I'd love to answer that. Because you can't tell who you're looking at in a Zoom interview. So this way you're able to build that rapport. We don't always recommend, panel interviews for Zooms, but sometimes you can't avoid them. So that's also really important. So one of the last things I want to talk about is what to do after an interview. So once you've had that Zoom interview, or once you've had that in-person interview, send a thank you note, send an email, customize your note specific to each member of the team. So if you're working with the hiring manager, you can say, thank you so much for your interview, I'd love to send everybody a note. Can you please forward along their email addresses? Or go to the website and see if you can find them there. Typically, if you know the first name and the last name, you can probably figure out what the email is based on correspondence with other people in the company. So try to do that as well. Customize your note. So if you had things that maybe you guys connected on, put that in there. You want to make sure that you're top of mind. And it's okay to ask for next steps, or say, I'm excited to learn about next steps, or I look forward to hearing from you in a couple of days. Also, a question that you could ask in an interview is, I'd love to hear what the next steps might be after this round. Make sure that you do have a couple of questions prepared for the interview as well. Then follow up in a week. So give them a week and then follow up and ask, hi, just wanted to send a quick note. Thank you again for the interview and your time. I look forward to hearing from you on next steps. I'm really eager about the position, or whatever it may be. Couple of things to make sure that I know I've said a couple times already, but spelling is really important. Using the right person's name is really important. The right spelling of their name also. With somebody that has not usual name, spelling the name Aly. Can be annoying sometimes if people don't take the minute to, actually look up how to spell your name. So I get that. And make sure you also say the right company name. We had a guy go in for a CFO interview with a big not-for-profit here in Rochester, and he got the name of the person wrong. He got the position title wrong, and he misspelled the company name, which I don't even know how you do that. And that email was forwarded to us here at JK to say, he clearly doesn't actually care about this job. He doesn't have attention to detail. He's probably not the best fit. He was a great fit, but he unfortunately didn't get the job because he didn't take those couple of minutes to just make sure that it was correct. And again, bring up a connection that you guys had with each other. Especially if they're going on vacation. I hope you have a great vacation. I look forward to hearing from you when you return, or whatever that may be, just to continue to keep yourself on top of mind. So I got done a little bit early, but that's pretty much all I have for you guys. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen. And if you have any questions, I'd be willing to answer those now.
Thank you, Aly. You had some really great tips. I liked so much, and I think this is really great for our clients, but I loved what you told us about how to include your address if it doesn't feel safe to include an address.
Yep.
Which is really common for survivors of IPV. And I loved that you just said city and zip code is all you have to add. I thought that was really smart. And I really liked the verbiage you used for the Zoom etiquette. Like, did I break up? What was the last thing that you heard?
Yeah.
Really, really good tips. And yeah, I like that a lot. So we had a question about sometimes people have a default voicemail and they might do that for safety reasons.
Yeah.
If they're trying to keep their phone number private, and if they're trying to keep who the phone number belongs to private. So what might it be like having the default voicemail? Is it better to have your own voice or the automated one? How do employers feel about that?
Yeah, so I guess really the big thing with the voicemail is just making sure that we're calling the right person, because, if we have a job opportunity or we want to extend an offer, we want to make sure we're calling the right person. But I guess I understand that, not everybody can have their name, maybe their phone number, they want to keep that private. I don't think it really matters whether you have your voice or an automated voice, but I guess what I would say to you is just make sure that you respond to the voicemail as quickly as possible. So if they do leave a voicemail, or maybe they don't, maybe Google the phone number to see where it came from, or save the phone number in your phone. So if you know that you're applying to a job at a certain company and you've talked to somebody there before and you know the phone number that they come from, maybe just save that in your phone so when they do call, you can answer. Or if they do leave a message, you know who it's coming from, so you can answer, return that call at a decent amount, within a decent amount of time, so that you don't miss an opportunity.
That's great. Something that came to mind too that might be useful is on your voicemail, it might be nice just to have your first name and your first initial. So for me, I might say, you've reached the voicemail of Carly I, and leave a message. And so that might be a way to keep it sort of anonymous.
Absolutely. That way, if you still have your first name, somebody will know, well, I know I was supposed to reach a Carly, so hopefully this is the right one.
Perfect. That's so good. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions related to interviewing, job search, related to being a survivor of IPV or not being a survivor, anything that came up that you have questions about? We have the chat box open and the Q&A open if anyone has any questions.
Another thing that I did want to mention while people add their questions are, it's okay to also ask a hiring manager or HR, did I answer that question to the best of what you were looking for? So if they ask you a specific question about a qualification you might have, it's okay to say, did I answer that appropriately, or did you get everything out of that answer that you were looking for? Or is there anything that I can expand on?
Well, that's great. Also, we want to mention that there's a really great resource out there available for clients, for survivors, for the community, but Dress for Success is a great resource for people that if you don't have access to interview ready clothes, Dress for Success is an agency we would definitely refer people to.
Yes.
There's one in the Rochester area. They're all over nationally. So really great reputation, very helpful resource.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. December 21st is our next workshop, 12 to 1. Again, it's going to be on cybersecurity and technology tech stalking, and we will have a representative from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. If anyone has any questions, you can call our office at 585-425-1580, or you can feel free to email me, Carly I, at resolve-roc.org. And also, the presentation was recorded, and we will post it to our website. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Aly.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.